Today we're going to take us another step back, and I want to talk about tab bar controllers and navigation controllers. So we're going to be making a fun little project to work on that. And this project is going to allow us to navigate different screens. So what we're going to see is two different tab bars. You're going to have this, we'll have a history tab and then a more tab. And on the more tab, we're just going to have a second screen and some navigation that we can do. So this is a simple example of the navigation controller. So you've already seen this with the detail views. So it should be more of a refresh. And then under history, we're going to be talking again about the navigation controller and how we can sort of create these, I would say, depth of screen navigation. So we're going to go through some multicolored screens so that you'll be able to sort of jump from screen to screen to screen. And this can keep on repeating. So what's going to happen here is the way the navigation controller works is we want to think of it in terms of basically sheets of paper. For every new screen that we want to add onto the screen, it basically puts another sheet of paper on top. And so we get this list of screens that we've been to. So we can go backwards and forwards, and going backwards and forwards will change our screen numbers. So we can sort of see that like these screens, the further we go into the hierarchy, the sort of the deeper the navigational stack we get. So you can imagine if I were to keep on doing this, this number is going to keep going up. And each time I do this, we're seeing a new screen that's being added. But I can use what's built into the navigation controller, which is this back button. And the back button will remember the last screen that we were on. And that allows us to sort of move backwards as we need to and forwards. The other thing that we're going to also see is you can go down multiple paths. So when I go to the green screen, I've got two buttons along the top, one that will take me to the blue screen and one that will take me to the purple screen. These are what are called bar button items. And taking the purple screen allows me to go a different path, and then I can go to the orange screen. Now the orange screen has no further buttons. And so if I want to go backwards, I need to hit the back arrows. Now the tab bar it should remember our navigation. So if I switch over to the more screen and then I come back to history, we're going to see that it's still on the 6 screen. And if I go back, it will allow me to sort of go back in the navigation. If we go forward one more time, if I go green, let's see, blue, yellow, and then on the yellow screen, I've got a done button. If I hit done, this will take me back to that first screen. So we're going to learn how to set this up, how this is going to work under the hood. And we might get into some additional topics, but this is kind of a starting point. So I want to refresh on the navigation controller. And before we do that, we're going to work with the tab bar controller. So we saw all of this on Monday of last week. I want to take a step back and sort of just refresh it, make sure that you understand how these two different things work. Now, both of these controllers that we're going to be working with, they don't really display themselves. They display supplemental information on the screen. So a navigation controller always has this navigation bar along the top. This allows us to customize the title. This allows us to customize buttons inside of it. Along the bottom, what we're going to see is the tab bar. And again, this allows us to customize this with custom images and text. And one of the other things that you're going to notice is when we're working with this standard control from Apple, we have kind of two states for these buttons. We've got the not pressed state or not selected state, and then we've got the pressed state. And generally the way this works is Apple uses what's called the templated image, and it will color that image in. And when it's not colored in with whatever the main color of the app is, then it will be sort of this gray view. So you'll see that as I flip between these two buttons, they're going to change their color, and they're going to usually just recolor how they are, though sometimes you'll notice that there might be two custom images for how this is done. In this case, all that's changing between these two is just the colors. So we're just recoloring this same image file with a different color. So we're going to be talking about that. We are going to get into we're going to talk about two ways to pop. So we're going to get into the navigation stack, and then we're going to talk about how to pop to the root view controller. And we're going to also talk about how to use an unwind segue. And then I think one other thing we'll do in here is we will, in order to show off the navigation stack, we're going to create this custom label, and I'll show you how to create a label in code. So that's the plan for today. Any questions before I get started? Okay, so what I want you to do is go into Xcode and let's create a new project. I'm going to go to File, New Project. I'm going to do a single view application. We could start with a tabbed application, but I want to go over how this is done, and I don't want to have any of this boilerplate code. So we're going to start from scratch because this is going to give you the most experience doing any of this. I've almost never used any one of these others. We may, in the 13th sprint, go into master detail. But besides that, in today's project, I'm not sure. We might do a game project. We might not. So that's for the afternoon project. I'll have to look at that when we get to that. So we'll do single view application. We're going to call this screens. And so you can just go ahead and call it screens. I'm going to name mine actually a little bit different. I'm going to call mine iOS6 screens. And I'm just going to put this on GitHub as well. All right, so just a refresher on Git. Git status tells me what's working in my folder, and Git log will show me what's going on here. I've created a new Git project, so anytime you create a new Git project, you can go in there and grab it. I am using SSH, which allows me to not have to type my password every time, so I've got a special key, and it's a different way of authenticating, so I should be able to add this origin, and then I can push this to the web, and I will share this link.
Hey, Paul, should we be pushing all of our projects from now on to our Git page as well, or just you?
I would just recommend that you follow along. The main reason I'm doing this is so that you have the code at the end of the guided project. For your other stuff that you're doing, all of the pull requests, whenever you're working on that, I do want you committing that as well. So this is just so that if you need to grab code, you can sort of follow along as I do a commit. And my goal is to sort of show you my process as I'm doing this. So I've done a change. There's a README that's not local on my machine. And now what I want to do is I want to pull that down. So I tend to do all my pulls outside of Xcode. Xcode is somewhat reliable, but it's also somewhat unreliable. So I'm going to do a git status, and I'm going to do a git pull. And this is going to pull down the README file. So just to make this look totally different from yours, I'm going to add that file. It makes it a little easier. The name I think will also help, as long as you haven't called yours iOS6 screens. If you just called your screens, that will be easier, but this will just sort of differentiate the two. Okay, so what I want to do is we're going to be working on the main storyboard, and we are going to remove the original screen, and we're going to drag out a new screen. So I'm going to switch my simulator. If you go to this menu bar, you can choose what device. You can choose a real device, or you can choose a simulator. For the most part, when I'm demoing things, unless I really need a hardware device, or if I want to test it on hardware, I'm going to start with the simulator. And probably the iPhone XR is a good model to start with, because this has a lower resolution screen than the XS or the XS Max. So this is going to be a slightly lower res screen, which means that if you're on a smaller laptop or slower laptop, it should be a little bit faster than some of the bigger screens. So hitting the run button is probably not a good idea right now, because we actually don't have a screen, so I probably don't want to do that, so I'll just stop that. All right, let me just make this a little bigger, and let's rearrange some stuff over here. All right, so our first goal is to create this navigation, this tab bar along the bottom that's going to allow us to flip-flop. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the object library, and we are going to search for something. So this is the object library. You can move the window around just by grabbing it and dragging it along the top portion. I always tend to keep it in the grid view. It doesn't appear to do tooltips, which is what we discovered last week. So that makes it a little bit hard to know what some of these are. So you can always flip-flop back, and you can scroll through this list and look to see what the names of these different things are. And I'll flip-flop if we need to talk about any of these in particular. And I think there's a couple that I do want to talk about. So what we're going to look for is one of these yellow icons for the view controllers. Basically, all these view icons represent view controllers. So this is a normal view controller. This is a navigation view controller. This is a table view controller. This is a collection view. And this is a tab bar controller. And this is the one that we're going to start with. So we will just drag one of these out, and you drag it to the gray area of the storyboard canvas. And then you let go, and you should see these three sort of iPhone screens appear, the tab bar controller and the other two items. Once we let go, we can pinch to zoom with the trackpad. Now, since I deleted the old view controller, I do not have an initial view controller. So can someone tell me what I need to do to make this so that this will work?
You go to the attributes inspector and set the tab bar controller to the initial view controller.
Exactly. So I'm going to find my attributes inspector, and I'm going to open that up. I'm going to select the tab bar controller, that little dot on the top of this screen, or I can just select this screen, or I can select it from if I select it from the document outline, it should zoom to that screen. And doing that, over in our attributes inspector on the right panel, we should see is initial view controller. We've got to set this, and then we can run it, and then we should actually see this UI appear on the screen.
I was trying to grab your phone, okay?
All right, so my simulator appeared, and now I can see it so that I can navigate between these two. Now, there's no icons here, so to just get something on the screen, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select each of these screens, and along the bottom, if we select this, we can select the item, or if you look in your view controller, you should see item 1 seen. And this is a tab bar item. So the tab bar item is something that we actually get out of the object library, and it automatically is added for us. But if I were to search down here, I would see tab bar item. So this is that star icon that we see over in the document outline. This is basically the model data for a tab bar. So it includes a badge number, it includes, it could be a custom system or just a totally custom icon that you provide yourself, and we did that last week with some custom images. You can customize the selected image if you want to, so if you want to override the behavior for what the image looks like, you can provide a separate one, and sometimes depending on the line widths or how the icon is drawn, you might want a separate image for that. And you can customize the offset of the position if you wanted to. But down in here, we can customize the title. So if I were to rename this just to show this off, we called this one history or something like that, it would name it down here. Or if I called this screen 1, we're going to see that that's going to rename the screen at the very bottom. Okay, I'm going to just set this up to be one of these defaults. Now, these defaults is going to have a specific name, and then it's going to have an icon that Apple provides. So if you've overridden it, we've called it screen 1, and I change this over to history using the default history tab bar item. This is something that Apple has provided. We will see that it will change both the title and the image. And so we're going to see that get updated on the bottom. And if I do the same thing for, let's go down to this second item, let's customize this, and let's just make it a more attribute. So go ahead and find the more, or select one of the other ones. It doesn't really matter. And then let's just play around with the badge. So the badge is going to show you when there's information to look at. So if I change this to 3 and press enter, what we should see is on our icon, we're going to see a 3. So this indicates that there's sort of 3 things, and whatever that thing is kind of dependent on your app. So it could be 3 new messages in the Messages app. It could be 3 conversations. It could be 3 notifications. It could be 3 emails. It's really up to you. So this allows us to set a badge number, and there's an API that allows you to work with this type of thing. So we can go ahead and run the app, and we should see these 2 new tab bar items. And selecting this. Now, notice that this is not going to update. You are responsible when you've got something of interest for the user. You're responsible for clearing that flag. So that's something you'll have to do programmatically, but this is just an example of what you could do. And I believe you can also customize the color. But this is the standard color that Apple uses, and so that's probably recommended for almost every app. Any questions on the tab bar?
2 questions. On our sprint challenge, we use a navigation controller that had 2 buttons on the bottom. And I noticed today when you changed the button on the one view controller, it also changed the button for the tab bar controller. And in the sprint challenge, for some reason, that did not happen.
Right here.
Is that automatic? Is there a way to prevent that? Or
are you talking about this changing?
Yes.
Yeah, this should update. And I've seen some glitches in Xcode where sometimes this bar for some reason gets collapsed. I've sometimes seen that clicking on it makes it redraw. So if you switch view controllers, that might make it redraw. Sometimes switching the simulated version on the canvas helps. For right now, I am sticking to iPhone XR just to keep things simple, and that's the default one that generally appears. And other times, if you're seeing like weird UI glitches, I would then switch to a code file, and then I would come back and see if it's any different. If that doesn't fix it, you can always try and restart Xcode. I would say the storyboard sometimes has some quirks, and it doesn't always render correctly. So like right now, I'm seeing this is not rendering correctly. So I switched away. If I click on this, it fixes it. And this one's not rendering correctly either. So I don't know if you were seeing this type of thing.
No, I was literally, the button did not change on the navigation or the tab bar controller, even though I changed it on the UI controller.
And when you run it, did you see it appear differently?
No, it never did. And I couldn't figure it out. It was a bug that I wanted to fix, but I was like, well, I got other priorities, so I didn't fix it. But I thought it was automatic from the lessons last week, and I don't know, something happened. It was not automatic. And then the second question is, you have that cool clock image, which I didn't catch how you got that in. I've changed my name to history, but how did you get the
right? So that's a system. I was talking about the system item. So if you look in the right hand at the top where it says tab bar item in the attributes inspector, there's a system item. And typically it will say custom, which means you get to totally control it.
Oh, I see. And you selected history. Gotcha.
Yeah, but if you select history, it will provide Apple's version of what history looks like. And I don't think, let me see if I can test something. So if I switch it to test, you're going to see that it loses that special icon. So I'm going to undo that with Command Z. Anytime we're working with Apple's system items, they are specific in name and the image. And they only provide like, I'm seeing like 10, 12 items here. So most of the time you're going to find an image and use it yourself. And that's kind of what we did with the globe image last week.
Cool,
I provided those two different images. So what's really important, and this is where you might have a challenge. So if I wanted to delete this connection, I'm not going to see anything on this view controller. And by default, when we're connecting multiple view controllers, they won't show anything until you actually connect them to the tab bar controller. So if I right click and drag to my view controller and I do a relationship segue, this is what we had set up on Monday of last week, the view controllers will add it to the list. And by default, I would say that this is the more screen. By default, a new screen might not have a view controller. So just for fun, let's go ahead and add one more screen and see if that's the case. So find a yellow view controller icon. That should be the white square in the center. And we're going to just drag this out. And what you're going to do is you're going to right click from the tab bar controller. So right click on that top screen, wherever it is on your screen. It should be on the left side, I guess. And drag to your new screen and do, again, another relationship segue view controller. That should add a third screen. And did it actually add the item? Okay, that's good. It looks like it did add the item. So what you should see is there should be an item here, and that is going to be the tab bar item. Now, if that did not appear, sometimes I feel like I've had to add this myself. You just find this star icon. This is the tab bar, and you just drag this to the screen. That automatically should add this item into the hierarchy. And then this is basically what's going to store all the information about this new screen. So to customize this one, I'll just make this downloads just for fun, and I'll go ahead and run. And we should see the different screens. And then in terms of reordering, yeah, you should be able to grab these icons and then drag them into the new order. So if you want to rearrange the screen order, it's a drag and drop interface for those. Okay, so I've done a quick commit and I've pushed that. I don't really want this extra screen, so I'm just going to remove it. So that will just leave us with the 2 screens. And now what I want to do is I want to work on this second screen. For this screen, we are going to set up a navigation controller for the content. So what I want to do is select the view controller. And once I've selected the view controller, or if I click on view controller scene, that should zoom to that screen. I'm going to click on the embed in button. So there's this embed in button on the very bottom right corner of the storyboard canvas. So that's our canvas is this region. Very bottom is that arrow going into a box. This is the embed in. And I want you to select the navigation controller. This should now give us a navigation controller pointing to this new screen, which gives us a top navigation bar. Now, if we're looking at it over in the simulator right now, I don't see that top bar, so I'm going to rerun the app and we should see something different. It is important when you're working on an app, don't wait until the end to compile and run the app. Like run the app as you're going. Anytime I'm working on an app, I'm constantly hitting that button to go to the new screen. So when I go to the more screen, I see the navigation bar appear at the top. So the navigation bar allows us to deal with hierarchies. And if I want to customize this, this is where Xcode doesn't automatically always insert a navigation item in my experience. So we're looking for basically this sort of less than symbol, this navigation icon. And this is going to be the navigation item which allows us to customize the title. So on a view controller, that is the initial navigation view controller. We should see this appear, but if it's not here, you're going to go into the object library, and then we are looking for this icon. So this is the navigation item, and if I just scroll down through this list, we should see navigation item. So every view controller in a navigation controller can have a navigation item, which allows us to customize the title, and it allows us to customize the back button if we need to, and other attributes. So here, I'm just going to call this white, and this will be the white screen. And then what I want to connect it to is a gray screen. So what I'm going to do is add another view controller with Command-Shift-L. I'm going to switch back to the grid view, the icon view. And in here, just grab another view controller, drop it. And we can see this view controller scene right here. There is no navigation item. So now what I want to do is I want to try to push to this screen. In order to push to this screen and show it, the easiest way is to add a button in the top right corner. So what I'm going to do is add what's called a UI bar button item. So if we type button, we should see this appear. And this won't show me the title, so I'm going to just show you in the other view. This is a bar button item. And this is what we'll drag out. And you can see that this should show me areas. If you're looking at my screen right now, it should show me areas where I can add this. So I'm going to let go and add that. And I'm going to call this gray. And what we're going to do is show another screen that's going to be a gray screen. So I will right click and drag to the view from the gray button. And then I will let go, and I want to just do a show segue. Just briefly to go over the different options that we have here. The show segue will do the push where it sort of moves the screen over to the left. The show detail is actually, it looked on iPhone, it looks like it's doing pretty much the same thing as present modally, but it's not. This is used for kind of a master detail view, which is what you'd see if you have an iPad and you have, if you have the iPad in the split view. So if we're looking at like the Mail app, that will sort of behave like this. So that's what that's for. And I think we'll get into that maybe in Sprint 13 or 14. Present modally will make it pop up from the bottom of the screen. Present as popover is used on iPad. This is really useful for showing additional details on an iPad screen. It basically presents the iPhone in it presents an iPhone size screen on an iPad, and then custom. I forget which sprint we'll do this in, but we'll do a custom transition. So this is where you can actually control how it behaves, and you can control the animation. You can totally customize the appearance. If you've ever used the, I believe it's still doing the animation in the, what's it called now? Apple Book. It used to be iBook, but now I think it's just Apple Books. In that app, it's got like this page flip animation. So that's another way of showing these different things. So you can customize that presentation. So I'm going to just do a show, and that will create this segue. And then the last thing I want to do is customize this screen. So if we look at this view controller, it does not have a navigation item. So you can see that there's just a view and there's no navigation item. So now you're going to go into the object library and you're going to find the navigation item. So navigation item, and just drag one of those onto the screen, or you can drag it into the document outline. When you do that, you should be able to then double click the title and call it gray. Last thing I want you to do is change the background color. So select the view controller's view, which is its screen, and you're going to change it from white to some light gray or dark gray color. Once you do that, hit the run button and then raise your hand if this is working, where you can navigate from the white to the gray screen.
Paul, are you aware that a few of us got the link a couple minutes late, so we're playing catch up?
You got the link late, Michael?
Yeah, me and I think the rest of my PM group.
What do you have right now?
I mean, I'm catching up pretty quick just by looking at your screen, but I think I'm a little further ahead than most people in being able to do that. Assuming you did nothing in code, I have.
We've done nothing in code.
Okay.
Do you have a link to a repo of this project, or?
Yeah, it's right under my list of what we're doing today.
Awesome. Just because a lot of people in my group also joined late.
Okay.
And history should just be a blank screen when we click that, right?
Yep. So we're just recapping the tab bar controller and navigation controller today, and trying to show off how they work. So I demoed at the very beginning on this simulator. This is kind of what we're building. It's an application that's going to have multicolored screens on the history page, but right now we're just setting up the more page. So in the more page, it should just say white and gray is a bar button item, and when we select it, it should show a new screen. So you've all seen this. It should be fairly straightforward to hook up. I just want to review how this works. And that's kind of what we're working on right now. Jeffrey, are you caught up, or do you need me to show anything else?
I got it.
All right, so
What's quick question? What's the symbol for the tab bar, the first tab bar, the item? So at the bottom of the view controller,
at the tab bar, its first item.
So
if
I
you go
just
to the
picked two items.
History. Okay.
The first one's history.
Thank you.
And so this is actually a system setting. So over in the tab bar item, if you select it, just select history. This doesn't really matter. I was just showing off that Apple provides these as starting places. Most likely when you're working on an app, your design team is going to provide you with the art assets, or if you're creating your own app, you're going to find some art assets. There is a useful website for icons. What is it? Icon 8, I think. Icons 8. So here, if I wanted, let's say, I wanted a map icon, I could search map. I could find all these different icons. And let's look at an example is this one. So there's two selection states on an icon. We have unselected, and then we have something that would be selected. So we would have these two different icons. So selecting this, you would be able to download for iOS, and you would then be able to download this as well. So that's how you can find something. I'll share the link for this. That's something you can look at later. Let's not worry about that right now. So if you have questions at the end of the class, we can talk more about icons for the tab bar. The other thing that I would probably point you to is sorry, they're vacuuming outside. My dog's barking. The other thing is Apple's design. So that would be Design iOS Guide. I really want the human interface guide. Okay, so if we go to this link, here you can learn about human interface guidelines for any type of app. I will post this as well, because this has size information that you'll need when you're customizing these different things. So if we go over to icons and images, and we look at image size resolution, this gets into what I was talking about last week about points versus pixels. So we have 1x, 2x, and 3x. This allows us to show more detail with our images on an iPhone Retina screen. So a 2x and a 3x Retina screen provide way more pixels per sort of square inch. So they are sharper than we have on, for example, the original iPhone. This will give you a listing of all the devices with a 2x or a 3x. So we can see that the iPhone XR is a 2x. I was talking about the iPhone XR being a good simulator to use because it has a lower resolution than, for example, the iPhone X, which is a 3x device. And if we look at bars under tab bars, so right now we're looking at tab bars. In here, maybe we need to go to here. So here we can see a listing and images of all of the different tab bar icons that Apple provides. So these are those system icons that we were looking at. And somewhere in here, they also talk about custom. Trying to find that because that's what I really wanted to talk about, but I'm not seeing it.
Those custom icons you just clicked.
Okay, so here's an example of a good practice for a tab bar icon. So generally when it is selected, we want it to look sort of full and colorful. So this is what Apple wants you to do, and this is the unselected state. This is an example of what they don't want you to do. So just doing an outline and coloring it in is not as obvious. So that's an example of that. And down here, we should have some icon sizes. So this will go over the different size information. So I'll include this as well so you can see that too. Okay, so you should have the app working now. And it's okay if you don't fully have this working. We're going to basically redo the same steps, and so you can reapply it to the bottom for these top screens. So right now you should have this, and now let's go back to history, and we want to have this colorful. So let me demo again what that's going to look like. On the history tab, we're going to have a red screen followed by a green screen, followed by a blue screen, a yellow screen, and then it actually will cycle back to red, or we can hit the done. If I go to red, it will keep on adding more screens. So we're seeing an example of navigation where we just keep seeing additional screens. If I do the back button, which is this top left, this will always take me back to the previous screen. It populates the name by default with the name of the last navigation item. And so we can go backwards and forwards this way. If I were to go to blue, yellow, and then what I set up here is going to either be an unwind segue, or I'm going to pop to root view controller. And so the done button allows me basically to skip all of the screens, and I can just basically go back to the beginning. So if I hit done, it will go back to the very first screen. So we're going to set this up. The first thing I want to do is just set up the red screen for you. So let's go ahead and set up a red screen that can then point to, well, actually, let's just change it to a red screen. So what we need to do is we've got our view controller right here. So it's this screen right here. I am going to change the view controller so that it's embedded in a navigation controller. So if we look at it right now, we don't have a navigation controller for the history screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that view controller. I'm going to go to the embed in button, and then I'm going to select navigation controller. And that will embed it, just like we did on the screen down below. Now what I'm going to do is change this background color. So I'm going to select the view controller's view. You can see that it's selected in the view hierarchy. If I click on view scene, it should zoom to that, and I can zoom in more with the trackpad using a 2-finger scroll pinch gesture. So with the view selected, that will be basically the entire visible region of the iPhone app. I'm going to change the background color to, we said we're starting with red, and we should see that. If you don't see red in your colors to select, just select custom from the pop-up list, and you can go for the color pencils view. You can go to the list of colors. Apple's got a selection of Apple colors, and if you go here, you can just select red, or you can go to the color pencils and select the variant of red here. I want to give this a red title, and I think for this one, I will set it up to use, actually, let's just set it up for a navigation item. So to get a navigation item on here, if you didn't see this step before, we're going to search for navigation, and we should see navigation item that's got this less than symbol for the navigation back button. You're going to drag this onto the screen. It doesn't really matter where you drag it. You just drag it onto the view, and it will add it to the very top. So here we'll just call this red. Now I want you to take 2 minutes, and I want you to go ahead and add a new bar button item that can point to the green screen. So what I want you to do is, we have the red screen. I want you to add this green button, and then I want you to add this green screen. And then once you have that, so that it's pushing the new screen, I want you to raise your hand.
Can you zoom out a little bit on your storyboard so I can see the view controller to the left of the red? Thank you.
So, Paul, when you drag over a segue from that bar button, it creates it looks like another title bar on the next page that you drag it to. Is that still considered the navigation bar that we're looking for, or no?
Say that one more time, Kobe.
So when you drag your segue over from the button on the red screen to your green screen, in that view controller, it looks like it sets out that title for the navigation bar at the top.
Mm-hmm.
Is that still considered what we need, or do we still add one?
I will go over it, so we'll see. Sometimes this, I feel like, behaves differently depending on how you do it. So just try and connect it. And if it does appear, sometimes you can double click and it will like let you edit. But other times I've noticed that it doesn't. So we will check that out.
Can't get the drag to work. It just won't drag from red to green. What could I be doing wrong where the drag won't set up the segue?
I'll show it again. Anessa, did you get it working?
I'm trying to. How do you make that the navigation controller before the red?
So that was, we embedded it in a navigation controller itself.
Oh, okay.
So you just select the view controller. It was just this white screen that was right here.
Right.
And I just click on the embed in button. That's that arrow going into the box in the bottom of the storyboard. And I just selected navigation controller.
Got it. Thank you.
Jonathan, did you finish?
So the green controller is already pointing to the white controller. What wow, I didn't know they would do that. Okay.
Did you just make a bad connection or an extra?
No, when I well, actually, I'm just clicking at the bottom of the green controller. It says red in on the storyboard, but when you click in that space that doesn't appear, it points over into the white controller.
Okay. You can always remove a connection.
I didn't put it. Okay. Well, can you try? If you click in the bottom of your green controller.
I don't have one yet, so
Okay.
I'm gonna demo how to do it. Michael, did you finish?
Me, Michael? Because I know there's a couple.
Yes, you. Michael Flowers.
Yes, yes.
Okay, your hand's not up.
Oh, my bad.
Okay, so let me show how this works one more time. So I've got my red screen. I can duplicate this or I can add a new screen. It's really up to me how I want to do it. So I'm just going to go ahead and switch to the grid view, find a view controller, drag it out. It is going to become my green screen. I need a tab bar item so that I can have a button to create this action to push. So let's go ahead and add a bar button item. So if I start typing bar, I'm going to look for the item. I'm going to grab the item and I'm going to drag it into the red navigation bar. I'm going to rename this to green. So this is going to be what's going to trigger the next screen. So if we zoom in a little bit more, I have the green bar button item. I see it in my list. It's under navigation item. So I see red as the title, and then I see a left bar button and I see a right bar button. Under that, I see the green. So I can drag from the green button in the canvas or from the document outline. I can right click and drag, or if I'm on a trackpad, I do a 2-finger tap and drag, or I can do a control left click and drag. So there's 3 ways to do this connection depending on your mouse and your preference. So I'm going to use my mouse. So I've got my wired mouse. I'm going to right click from the green, connect it to the right, and click on show. And that will give me a way to show this screen. Now I want to customize this screen over on the right. So I'll click on the view controller. I notice that in my document outline for this view controller that I've just selected, it does not have a navigation item. So I'm going to find that from the object library with Command-Shift-L. I'm going to look for navigation item. So if I type in nav, I should see 3 elements. This white icon with the less than symbol is the navigation item. I drag this anywhere onto this view controller. I should see a plus, and I let go. And now we see a title bar with a title, default title appears. I'm going to call this green. And then I'm going to change the background color. So I'll select the background. I will click on white color where the color was selected for the background. I'm going to click on custom. I'm going to look for a color. I'm going to go for sea foam on my colored pencils. And that looks like a pretty fun color. So that's our green color. And then I'm going to hit the Command R to run it.
Hey, Paul, quick question. What's the difference between the navigation bar and the navigation bar item as far as pulling it from the object library?
So if you were doing a modal view, you might want to drag out a navigation bar yourself. But the navigation controller is going to provide that sort of for free, so we don't need to drag that one out. So let me see if I can grab one of those just as a demo. So if I find the view controller, you don't have to follow, but let me see what will happen. Okay, so for this, I'm going to have my object library, and I'm going to look for nav. And then if we're looking at the list of views, I've got a navigation bar. So if I drag this out, this basically gives me a title bar that I can position, I think, anywhere I want. So just for fun, I'll add a button. And let's see if we can show this. I'll present this one modally. So I see the red screen, I click the green button, I see this new button, and that's actually not showing anything.
It doesn't show because you dragged a button, not a bar button item, and that must be the title thing on the right must be a bar. Oh yeah, you put it on the navigation bar, so it needs to be a bar button item. That's what was happening to me the other day.
Did I really do that? Oh, you're right. So if we do drag a button, I don't think I actually connected it right. Maybe if I connected from the button, let's see if this one works. Okay, I'm going to delete both of these and we'll try one more time. This should work. I'm going to cross my fingers though. Okay, so we see a new thing appears. I did the show here. I wanted to do a modal. So if I do this present modally, it's going to pop up from the bottom. And again, hopefully this will work.
It is.
And so it appears from the bottom. So this gives me the opportunity to customize the screen. So if I wanted to have bar button items in this one, I could go ahead and add those items. Does that make sense, Kobe?
Yeah, that does. Thanks.
So you can add a title bar. You can also add a toolbar that goes along the bottom, which is separate from the tab bar. So I'll just commit this and say playing with a toolbar. But I'm going to probably remove this. So I'll just commit this and push that if you want to see what this looks like. Any other questions?
Can you run through your screens without that thing?
So I can't go back now. So the downside of if I do a modal push, I'm responsible for dismissing this view. And I don't get sort of the free behavior that we're getting right now with the navigation forward and backward. So in order to get this one to dismiss, I need to write some code.
I meant to just like take it out and go back to our project so we can see.
The other thing that I think was some of you got stuck on, I know Dan mentioned this, it looks like you can drag from the bar button item to another screen. But if you accidentally embed a button, which is totally valid, if you wanted to customize the appearance of the bar button item, adding a button inside of a bar button item, if that makes sense, allows you to further customize the behavior. I've done this in some of my apps in the App Store, and it just gives you a little bit more flexibility that you don't get from a bar button item. So all we should have here is the red and the green screen. We're going to take a 5-minute break and then we will come back. So I want you to stand up, get some water, get a snack, and then come back and we will finish this out. And then I will answer any other questions we have.
I guess I'll wait until we answer questions later.
All right, we are back.
Paul, can you run your app now?
Yep. So running the app, all we have is a green screen.
Okay, can you go, and all right, if you go between the, we're at the bottom, and then navigation controller, yeah, in the middle, right there in the middle, it just jumps the, the divide and goes to the white one.
What do you mean?
It jumps over.
Are you just saying that the button is bigger than you expect?
No, just in between that space, there's an unidentified, I don't know, button that makes it jump over to the white.
It should be dependent on half the screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm clicking, and right here it switches.
Ah, okay.
You can see I'm halfway in between.
Okay.
So anytime we're working with navigation bar and tab bar, they sometimes have their buttons a little bit bigger than they visually look.
Okay.
So I can select anywhere over on the left. I can select anywhere over here. Once I get over here, it's now on the next one.
I see. Oh,
Yep.
thank you.
And the same is true. I'm name blanking on the proper term that Apple engineers used for this. But the same thing is true with our bar button items. If you click usually to the left of them, they are a little bit bigger than the actual text or the icon. And that just makes it easier for your customers and users to tap on these tiny little buttons.
So the official term is called a name link.
A what?
Name link. That's what they call them.
No.
Oh, you just said that.
No, I forget what the official term was.
Oh, okay.
I read about it in Ken Kosienda's book. If you want a fascinating read about iPhone and how it was made, Ken Kosienda was one of the original iPhone developers. So he worked on the iPhone keyboard and the iPad keyboard, and this book is called Creative Selection. So it's a really fascinating book. I've listened to the audiobook. I had the physical book. But basically, they discovered that certain buttons need to be bigger than what their visual appearance is. Same is true on the keyboard. If I had a keyboard open when you're tapping on it, if I was to do a text message, every key press on the keyboard, if I want to see the keyboard, to show the software keyboard, I would do Command K. That would make this appear. So that's the Command K shortcut. And no matter where I click, it's going to click on one of these buttons. So you'll notice that if I'm in the very top corner of this G and I'm sort of going up, at some point it's going to switch to Y, but it's somewhat intelligent in how it does this based on sort of thumb position and size. So it's going to choose a key no matter what I press. Same is true with this area over here. If I click here, it's going to select an A. If I select here, it's going to do an L. So that's just how a lot of these buttons work. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to set up additional screens. And let's see, we're going to make it go from red to green to purple to orange. So that's what I want you to do right now. And when you've got the purple and orange screens, I want you to raise your hand. So I'll just write that out just so that you have a reference. We are going to go from red to green to purple to orange. So you'll need to set up those bar button items. All right, so I'm just gonna go ahead and add these additional screens. So let me pull up the object library. I'm going to keep the object library open, so I'm actually going to hold the Option key when I click on it, just because there's a lot of things I want to drag out from it. And I'm going to switch to the grid view. So I'll just drag 2 new screens. First one's going to be purple, the next one's going to be orange. Go for maybe eggplant. Oh, that's really dark. That's good enough. And then I will go for an orange. Maybe we'll go tangerine. Okay, with that, I will connect these with bar button items. So I'm going to find an item, drag it out, right click, show, drag another bar button item out. Oh, that didn't go where I wanted. I'll hit undo twice, it looks like.
I think you need a navigation item first.
Yep, so that's one weirdness that you can run into. So I'm going to drag a new navigation item out, and I'll drag another navigation item out. I won't see it on the new screen until I do that connection. And I'll try and drag that button now, create the new connection, and now we should see that. Then I should be able to edit these titles.
Well, I'm noticing when you drag stuff out from your items library, it goes a lot faster than my computer. I'm just wondering what kind of computer you're working on.
I have a MacBook Pro 2018 15-inch.
Okay.
What are you on?
A 2017 MacBook Air, so it's not that far behind.
Okay.
Well, whenever you're loading storyboards, is it pulling from the graphics card or the processor? You know? I've always wondered that.
The rendering here, it could be a mixture of both. Apple doesn't really talk about how they implement this, so the source is closed, so I don't really know what they're using. Most likely it's going to be some kind of custom drawing panel.
You could find out by using a Hackintosh and then not implementing graphics support.
Well, I've been thinking about, I have the 2016 and the MacBook Pro, and the 2016 MacBook Pro has a 2 gigabytes dedicated video RAM, where the 2017 has upgraded to 4. So, and I've been thinking about upgrading next year when the new model comes out. So I may just see whenever that happens.
Mm-hmm. So we should have a bunch of more screens. And now what I want to show you is how we can add numbers to these so that it can sort of keep track. Does anyone have any ideas? Do any of you have an idea on maybe how I might go about doing this? How can I know what screen I'm on?
Just put another view inside of each view controller, which then writes the number.
Yeah, so that's sort of part of the process. How do I know what number I'm on, though?
I don't know this verbatim, but my guessing is that the nav controller keeps track of how many are on the stack, and that we could like maybe even name all segues the same identifier, so that we can programmatically add a new label to each screen and then have that label reflect the number of views in the stack.
Yeah, you're on the right track. So if we jump to the documentation, so anything that we do, going to documentation is really a good starting point. And if we look at the UI navigation controller, we're going to see an example of how this works. So this is the settings app. This is an older version of the settings app. This might be like iOS 7. So it looks a little bit less colorful than it does now, but it's the same general idea. Is when you click on general, it should take us to the general screen. And if you were to go on to another options screen, it will take us to a new screen. So that's essentially what we have here with these different colored screens. We just don't have all of this additional content. So this creates a stack of screens, and you want to think of that as like a stack of pancakes or a stack of papers. It's a first on, last off sort of process. So when you add a piece of paper, if I had my flashcards here, and I start putting flashcards on top of each other, this creates a stack. So you can think of each of these flashcards as a separate screen. And so I'm just adding more screens. And then when I want to go back, I pop off or I remove one of these screens from the display, and I remove another screen, and I remove another screen. And that's exactly what we're doing with the colors. And then we're left with our starting screen. So that's how this system works. And so we can count how many screens are on the screen. And there are some properties. I'm looking at the UI navigation controller in the dash documentation, but you can also look at this in Xcode or online. And in here, we will see that every navigation controller starts with a root view controller. So that's going to be our starting screen, which in this case is this red screen. And then if we're pushing new screens on, then that is going to be, there's a method here called push. So push means to basically put it on top of the stack. Pop means to remove it from the stack. So these are terms you'll see again when we talk about stacks. But anytime you think of stacks, think of a stack of papers or think of a stack of pancakes. I think papers make more sense because you want to pop off one piece of paper at a time versus a pancake, which you might cut and then eat. So that doesn't quite work as well for removing a pancake because generally you'll eat them instead of taking them away. So when we're working with this, we should see items on the stack. And if I click on items on the navigation stack, we're going to see a top view controller. This is whatever's the most visible view controller. So if I click on green, green is the top view controller on the current navigation stack. So it goes red and green. Purple is not on the stack because I have not clicked the button. But if I click the button, now we have 3 view controllers. Purple is on top of the other ones. Okay, we also have the concept of the visible view controller. And again, anytime you're curious as to what these properties are, I'm not going to explain every single property. We go back to the documentation and we read the description. And then if we want more information, we read the discussion. And usually Apple has very good documentation on these types of things. All right, so looking at view controllers, this is actually looking interesting. And if we click on this, the view controller is going to explain how this works. So these are all of the screens that are currently in the navigation stack. So these are all the screens that we've pushed onto the screen. And down here, it tells me the root view controller is at index 0. So when we're working with data structures on computers, we tend to start with an index 0. So that means that this very first screen, red, is considered the 0 screen. Green is considered number 1, and purple is considered number 2, and orange is considered number 4. So it's typical to use a 0-based numbering system, which just means we start counting at 0 instead of starting at 1, and that's just how a lot of algorithms work on the computer. So when we see something like that, don't get scared. It's just going to be off by 1 from what you're used to if you're not used to computer programming. Was that a question I heard?
I heard you go 1, 2, then 4.
So this is screen 0, index 0 in the root view controller. This is screen 1, this is screen 2, and then this is 3. But when we're actually counting with starting at 1, this would be the 4th screen. This is the 3rd screen. This is the 2nd screen. And this is the 1st screen. So it takes a little bit of getting used to. Don't worry if you don't understand this. It's really not important for today. The most important thing that is for today is that we can count how many screens there are. So if we know how many screens there are, we can display a number on the screen. So going off of what John was talking about, we can add a view to the screen. And in this case, it's going to be a UI label. We'll add that in code programmatically to one of these screens, and we'll be able to display that information. So Michael, you talked about adding some extra stuff. We can actually simplify that a lot by just creating one code file that can display a number, and then it can ask for how many view controllers there are, and it will just work. So let's go ahead and try and implement that. We don't need this original view controller file. So I'm going to remove that, and then I'm going to do a commit, and I'll push my changes as they are right now. Actually, no, I'll add the new file, and then I'll do a commit. So I'm going to go ahead, remove view controller.swift. I'll just delete it. I'm going to move this to the trash. That should be okay for you. So I'll click move to trash. As long as you move view controller.swift to the trash, you're fine. If you have yours under version control, you should be able to undo some of the changes that you do. Under source control, if you've made a change that you do not like, you should be able to say discard all changes. I wouldn't recommend doing this right now, and it should take you back to where you are. So probably anytime before you remove a file is maybe a good time to do a commit. So what I did was a little bit risky. So I would recommend maybe before doing that type of thing, doing a commit. So in this case, I'll say, what did I change? So if I didn't want to do, so let's say I want to separate these two actions into two different commits. Can someone tell me what I would need to do right here?
Just uncheck whatever you don't want to commit.
Right. The challenge with that is I've got a project file, and the project file is a little bit hard to read. So I can see that here it removed a view controller class. And if I scroll down to one of these other hash marks, I can see it looks like it removed it from a group. And then if I scroll down a little bit further, I removed it from a build phase. And then was there another one? I'm not seeing it. So that looks like that's a pretty easy to follow change. But if you have multiple things going on, it can be really hard to read these changes. So since I only did two things or one thing here, I can uncheck these two. And now what's going to happen is this will have just the storyboard commit. So if I just add the storyboard changes in main.storyboard, I could say added a purple and orange screen. So I can go ahead and I can commit those two changes. And so now I've separated the change of actually removing a file. So then I can try again, Control Option C to do a commit. I will say removed default view controller.swift file. Okay, and I can commit these two files. These I need. It's important to understand that I need both of these changes together because the project file manages all of the files in the list, and then the file itself that I'm removing needs to also be disappeared. It needs to go away. So this is moving to the trash. So I'll commit these two changes as a single thing because that's exactly what that is. And now we're ready to add a new file. So I'm going to right-click here, or I can right-click on any of these files within this group, iOS6 screens. And if I do that, a new file should appear in this list. So I'm going to do a Cocoa Touch class. I'll hit next. And I'm going to subclass from UI View Controller. So I'll change the subclass to UI View Controller. I'll hit Tab to autocomplete. And then this, we are just going to call this, I think, just numbered view controller. So just call it numbered view controller. It's going to be a Swift file. And then I will hit next and hit create. And while that's creating, I will also push my changes to GitHub. So it's pushing 2 commits that I've just done. A git status should show me that I now have a new file. So this has not been staged. So that's okay. We'll come back to that in a little bit. All right, so in the new file, I'm going to remove the bottom lines of code. I don't need that for navigation. And I'm going to get rid of that. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new label. And so at the very bottom on line 18, I'm going to say let label equal UI label. And I have 2 options. I could give it a frame, or I could just give it a 0 frame. So it's going to have no size. So 0, this should be a 0 size label. And what I want to do is when I modify the label, I'll ask the label to resize itself. Okay, so in the view did load, let's customize the label. And then we'll figure out, so that's going to be our first step. And then our second step is going to be figure out how to display the stack count. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say label dot, and then there's a bunch of attributes. So we've done this all in Interface Builder. Well, Interface Builder is going to basically provide us access to a lot of the properties on a label, but we can modify all of those properties and do dynamic things if we do it in code. So in here, I want to change the, let's see, the text color. Since we've got these bright colors, I think white's going to be our best option. So let's go ahead and choose the white color. So if we set the label.text color equal to .white, that will set our white color. I can then also say stuff to fix other attributes. So we've got text alignment where we can basically center align or left align or right align. So in this case, I'm going to want to center it. So I'm going to say center is equal to, sorry, not center, the alignment, and its text alignment is equal to .center. And if you're interested in any of these properties, the key that I would recommend that you do is if you control click, you can see this little menu, or if you want to see the documentation for one of these, just do an option click. So if I option click on center, it should show me what it should do. And if I want more details about the actual properties themselves, I can also option click on that. You should see a question mark. And if you see this question mark, I want everyone to go ahead and hold the option key, click on text alignment or text color. And if you get that working, raise your hand. Okay, so when we're looking at this, we can see that this has a get and a set. That means we can get the value or we can set the value. The description is going to give you details on how it actually works, any quirks with it. Sometimes they have code samples, which is really nice. Okay, so next up, what we want to do is make it a bold font. So we can set the font by creating a new UI font color. And there's a convenience method called bold system font of size. So we'll go ahead and use that. And let's go for something like 64. It's going to make it nice and big. And then the last thing I want to do is I want to center this. So we talked about alignment being centered. That's going to be how the text is sort of on the left, the right, or the middle. I also want to center this squarely in the center of the screen. So I want the number right here. If you're looking at the iPhone, I want it in the dead center. In order to do that, there's a center attribute, which is a CG point. That's an X and a Y coordinate. So we can set this to the same as view. View is going to be the entire screen that we see. View also has a center attribute. So these are rectangular regions. This will center it in the screen, and that will be a starting point for us. As a sanity check, let's say label.text is equal to hello. And then if you were to go and run this right now, we're not going to see anything because it's a 0-size label. So I don't expect to see anything. And I have not added it to the screen. So the other thing the storyboard does is it adds it to the screen. So in order to add it to the screen, we need to say view.add subview and then label. So this is like dragging and dropping on the storyboard canvas. Now we've got the label on the screen. But if the label has a 0 height and width, we can't see it. So there's one more thing that you need to do when you work with labels programmatically, is there should be a size to fit method. If we call that and we run it, we should see that this now is going to be big enough for the word hello, and it should be on the screen. And if it's not, then we've got a problem.
Assign the class in interface builder.
Oh, yes. The last thing that we need to do is we actually have to use this numbered view controller. So all this code is great and it works, but if we don't actually use it anywhere else, it's not going to get loaded. And since we're loading all of our classes in the storyboard file, in order for this to display, we'll have to go to our red view controller, click on the view controller in the top, and then go over to the ID card, the attributes inspector, and type in numbered view controller. So if I do that, and if the other code file has now built, we should be able to run this, and it should appear on the screen. So here's hello. Okay, and it looks like the hello text actually appears in the bottom right corner. So this actually might make it move around a little bit. I'm going to see what happens if after we do this, I recenter it. And we can see it's now centered. So size to fit is going to change the bounds. And so our center actually here was going to be the same as the position. So that's not going to help us. So reposition after a new size. If I had set the label to specific dimensions, we wouldn't have this issue, but because I'm dynamically resizing the label, we're going to run into this type of problem. So this is now centered. It's exactly what I want, except I want to use numbers. So, and the number I want to start with should be something like, it should be a 1 on this first screen. So we're going to do a normal 1-base counting system. And just display that. If I click on green, I want to show green.
Do we need to set all the view controllers to that name?
Yep. So why don't you go ahead and set them all. So we should see 1 on every single one of these. And if you don't, you just need to go ahead and set that view controller. Okay, so to make this display the right value, we need to figure out how to do this. And I want to do it when the view appears. So I'm going to move this logic into another method. So let's move this up. And we are going to take advantage of what's called the view will appear. So you should see view will appear in the text here. So all I'm doing, anytime I want to add a method and override it, if I start typing something like view will, I should get some suggestions. So just make sure you can find the view will appear, and you can use autocomplete to fill that in for us. Otherwise, you just need to copy what's on my screen, and that will work as well. Typically, these have a super method, so we need to call that as well, and we just pass the same information to that. So you're going to write exactly what I have on my screen. And in here, I want to figure this out. So I'm going to move this down with the Command Option square bracket. And now I want to figure out the number. So we know that the navigation controller has this list of view controllers, and we can ask it to count itself. So we should be able to grab that. Every view controller that's in a navigation controller has a reference to the navigation controller. It's an optional value, so it may or may not be set depending on if we're in a navigational stack. So we should be able to say something like navigation controller dot, and then we're going to look for the view controllers property that we looked at. So I see here view controllers is an array of view controllers. It auto-completes that. It puts a question mark in automatically if I hit tab or enter. And then there's a count attribute that's going to tell us how many there are. So I want to get this value and I want to put it into that label. In order to do that, I'm going to do an if-let syntax. So I just want you to write if-let, and then we'll just call it number equals this value. So what's going to happen here is if we are in a navigation controller, which we are, it's going to ask how many view controllers there are, or for all of view controllers. Then it's going to ask it to count them. And then if we get that number, then what we can do is we can update the label. So we can say something like label.text is equal to, and we'll create a string version of this number. So I should be able to say something like this. And then the last thing, if I want that to recenter, I will say label. Actually, we're going to have to do a couple things here. I'll probably have the size to fit, and then I might need to recenter it again. So we're actually having to do a little bit more work than I expected. And this is because we don't have auto layout set up. So I'm showing you, this is a way to do it without auto layout. And if we go ahead, clicking these, we should see this now counts. So if you have that working, I want you to raise your hand. If you have a question, please let me know.
Were we supposed to apply this class to the grayscale other in the tab 1, 2?
You don't have to, but you could.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to do a commit. I'll commit all of those changes together since they're kind of a cohesive unit, and then I will push that. Just as a sanity check, I can type git status and then git push.
I'll have a override can only be specified on class members error where the override function is.
So override's a special keyword. It needs to be in front of you will appear.
No, yeah, look, my code looks exactly like yours, but for some reason it doesn't. Maybe I have an extra space in between override and func. Let me check that.
Extra spaces should be okay.
Which brings up a question anyway. I haven't figured out the error yet, but when you typed view will appear to pre-populate that method, it did pre-populate, but the override func part was not in there. Did you write that in yourself, or did that
I did not. It popped up. Sometimes it appears and sometimes it doesn't. So if I start typing will view did appear, which is another method that gets called after it's visible, I'm pressing enter, and this should autocomplete and it should insert it. I've noticed that sometimes it doesn't, and in that case, there's usually a fix-it. So if you get something like this, you would see a fix-it where it says overriding declaration requires an override keyword. If you see this little red bubble on my screen,
Yep.
You can click that and you can click the fix it button, and this one should insert that automatically, or you can type it yourself, just write override. This is just a rule where we're changing the behavior that's built in, and so we're customizing it. So we have to override the default behavior, which really doesn't do anything. So this allows us to add our custom logic.
I do have a fix it with the error. It says replace override with a quote, which that doesn't sound like it's going to fix it.
Can you just do a Command B and see if it gives you any other insight?
Did you close your view did load function properly and put the view will appear in the correct place?
The other thing is, it's really important is you need to have these braces. Braces always need to match a number. So you need to have a left, which is going to look like this one. You need to have a right, which is going to look like this one. If you mouse over your braces, sorry, not mouse over, you right arrow over back and forth, it should highlight on the screen in yellow the pair match.
Good work, Samira. That was it.
If that doesn't match, then you just need to find it. And the same is true going the other direction.
Yeah, that was it. Good work, Samira.
Awesome.
I did that because it didn't happen to me. Okay.
Hey, Paul, can I ask, what does the super.view will appear do, and when do we need those?
It will tell you if you need it. So if you option click on view will appear, it tells you if you need to call the super method. And right here on this line, it tells me if you override, you must call super at some point. That will run any additional logic that Apple has. So it's just, don't worry about it too much right now. Just write it. You can look at the documentation. It should always tell you if you need to call super. Anytime we're overriding behavior and we're trying to extend it, so in this case, we're trying to show a number, we need to make sure that we're calling some of the default code that Apple has already provided us. Otherwise, weird things will happen.
Okay, thanks.
And then also in the label.text equals string number, I have a very weird error that says use of unresolved identifier number, and then it suggests that I write in.
You need to make sure that you say if let number equals.
Oh, yeah, never mind, typo.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to move on. And the next thing I want to do is show you how we can finish. So let's on this orange screen, I'm going to add another button. Let's see, how do I want to do this? So one option that I can do is if I wanted to sort of go back, and I don't think I'll connect this one, I just want to show you how it would work. But if I were to set an IB action, so when we do a connection, it looks something like this. And I had this done function, takes a sender, which can be any. We can call something like the navigation controller, and there's a method on the navigation controller called pop to root view controller, or we can pop to a specific screen if we wanted to. In this case, I might want to pop to the root view controller, and I will pass in true to make it animated. So this is one way that we can sort of leave this screen. So if we want to go all the way back to the beginning, we should be able to leave that screen and do this action. And I don't know if this is going to give me problems. I will try and connect this for this last screen. So I'm going to throw a button in the nav bar. Let's call it done. And let's see, I'm going to connect that to the done button. So we can right click and drag and connect to that IB outlet that I set in code, or we can go into the assistant editor and we can connect it from here to here. This should connect it. I'm going to test this. I didn't try this morning, so hopefully this should work. I'm going to click on the different screens, orange, and then I'm going to hit the done button here, and it's going to go back to the root screen. Okay, so that's one option for setting up a connection like this. We can use the navigation controller to pop to the very beginning. There is another way that we can do this, and that is to use what's called an unwind segue. So I'm going to demonstrate how to do that. So this is how you can do it to pop to the root view controller. So I will commit those changes and push them. The other method that we have is that we can unwind to a segue. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up maybe 2 more screens. Let's see, how do I want to do this? I'm going to duplicate this green screen. So I'm just going to click on green screen and I'll just do a command copy and then I'll do a command V to paste it. I should see a new screen appear on top of it. I should be able to drag that up. We're going to add 2 new screens. So I'll paste it one more time and then we're going to make these the blue and, oh, that didn't paste. Might have to copy that one more time. So I want 2 new screens and just a sanity check, move them around, see if there's anything hidden if you do a duplication. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another button to the green view controller. It's going to be called blue. So I'm going to open up my editor. We're going to find an item, drag that onto the screen, call it blue. And we're going to drag that to connect up to this new screen. We'll do this show. And then I will modify this to be blue. And then I will modify this other one. If you copied this, just double check to make sure that it's not connected to a segue. So this shows purple. This is going to go to yellow. And let me just zoom in a little bit so you can see this. Hide that bottom screen. And then I'll customize these colors. This is really tripping me up. So I want a blue. Let's go aqua. And then for this one, let's go yellow. Go lemon. And I can create this connection, another show, and that will show this new screen. And I'll change the purple button on this one to not another done. Okay, so I should have new screens. If I go ahead and run this, we'll have another option, another path to go down. This is just to sort of show that we can have sort of different navigation. So I can go to purple, orange, and see my orange screen, or I can go back to blue, and I can see my blue and then my yellow screen. And then I got a done button that doesn't do anything yet. So I want to show you how to do an unwind segue. And what we're going to do is we're going to create another customization of the numbered view controller. So I'm going to click on the numbered view controller. Somewhere in my document, sorry, not my document outline, my navigation, project navigator, over on the left panel, we're going to add a new file. And we're going to do a subclass of the numbered view controller. So I'm going to do a Cocoa Touch class. And this is going to be, we'll just call it the red view controller. And it's going to subclass from numbered view controller. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next. That should create a new code file. I'll just hit create. And this is going to be a subclass of our class. So now we're providing an alternate implementation. And I think the only thing that I need to do here is I want to set up a unwind segue. So this is going to be an unwind segue. This is another way of doing it, that pop that I did, except this will go to, this will allow us to create this other connection. So I'm going to do an IB action. And then the name of this doesn't really matter, so I can call it whatever I want. So I can call it unwinds to red. And then it's going to have a sender. The only thing that's important is that this matches. So there needs to be a storyboard segue. And I'll do a sanity check. So we can just write something here in a print statement. And so this is going to be our red view controller. What I want to do with this is when we're on, let's see, this done button on the, and I need to change the title here. So on our yellow screen, what I want to do is I want to hook the done button up to the unwind segue. So I'm going to go back and show how this is done. So let's just change this title to yellow. And if I select this done, the way an unwind segue will work is I'll be able to right click and drag, and it should show me something like unwind to red. Now, in order for this to work, I need one of my view controllers to actually be a red view controller. So I'm going to, before I hook up that connection, I'm going to go to the red view controller. I'm going to click on the view controller. I'm going to go to its class inspector and change it from numbered view controller to red view controller. So now it has this extra method that allows me to do the unwind. And so I can come back to my yellow, and on this done button, I will right click and drag, and you're dragging to this other option, and I'm going to zoom in because this is hard to see. This is, I rarely actually do this method, but this I just want to show you for showing how it's done. If you ever hear about the unwind segue, if you ever need to use it in one of the projects, you just right click on one of your buttons and you drag it to what's called the exit. This thing is the exit. And if we right click on this, we should see if you have a method defined in your project that's going to take a storyboard segue, that will be an option to jump to. And then if we right click and drag and we click unwind to red, that will create the connection. So now if I go ahead and run.
Did you change the class of the yellow view controller, or is that still the?
No, the yellow view controller has been unmodified. So if we jump through, and I actually go to the blue screen, if I click done, it should take me back to red. I'm going to do one more thing. For this one, just for fun, instead of having just a done, I'm going to add one more bar button item. So I'm going to drag another item out. And this one is going to be a little bit funky. I want to maybe repeat. And let me switch the order so this is easier to click. So I'll have a done button on the left and then a repeat on the right. What I want repeat to do is, this might cause a visual glitch in a storyboard. You would actually never really do this in a real project. But if I connect this to red and I do a show, it should allow me to connect that. Now, when I do that, it does this glitch where we can't actually see the navigation bars anymore because it's just not showing up. In order to see that, you would have to click on your navigation controller. You can sort of see them, but you won't be able to, I don't think you'll be able to edit them if you click on certain screens. Like if I click back on yellow, I can't modify it. So this is super gnarly. If I click on this segue again, I can remove it by pressing the delete key and everything goes back so it's normal. So I'm going to just connect that. So it's going to be weird, but I'm going to connect this so that it goes back to red. And if you just watch my screen, so I'm creating this show, it creates this connection. I'm going to hit the run button. And now what we should be able to do is we should be able to step through the app and basically create an infinite number of screens. So I'm just going to cycle through. I'll go to blue, yellow, repeat. Now we're on red again. Green, blue, yellow, repeat. And you can see that we're continuing to push on new screens. Repeat. Now I'm back on the red. I'm going to do this one more time. I'm going to get to yellow screen. And instead of hitting repeat, I'm going to hit done. What it should do is it should unwind to the red view controller. Now there's multiple red view controllers that I've added. So this may go to the first one that it finds in the stack. So remember, if we're on a stack of papers and we've already got multiple reds, we're going to keep popping off until we get to the first red. So if I hit done, it goes to the first red, which is a 13. If I go back a couple more on this one, now I'm back on yellow. I'll hit done, we'll jump back a few more screens. If I go back one more, hit done, we'll jump back a few more screens. So it's sort of popping them off. It's not going to pop all the way to the front. So this is just another way to go back a series of screens. If I, let's see, if I go all the way on the blue and I keep repeating, so let's add a bunch. I'll get few more, and I'm going to go now to purple. So purple is going to take me to orange, and orange has a done button. This done button should pop me to the root view controller. So I'm going to click that, and we go all the way back to the beginning. So unwind segues are okay. This is kind of a non necessarily real world example of how you might connect this, and the fact that we're adding this one segue that messes up the storyboard is a little bit annoying, but this is not typically something you would do. I'm just trying to demonstrate how these different screens work. Does anyone have any questions about this?
Paul, somehow when making the blue and yellow screens, I lost my navigation bar on all of my screens.
Yes, that's what I was talking about.
Oh.
So this is something you'd almost never do in an app where you just sort of push screens on. Like typically we will have an app that looks more like the settings app, and the settings app allows us to drill into something like general and then accessibility, and then we could go to large text. We can change the font size that we're using in our iPhone apps by moving the slider, stuff like that. So typically you can't keep adding screens. It never really makes sense. So this is just an example to sort of give you insight into how this sort of works. When we added this last connection from the yellow screen to the red screen, it confuses the storyboard. So the storyboard thinks that there isn't a root navigation controller, and so it stops showing the navigation bars. This is a bug in Xcode, and to see that again, you either need to click on the navigation controller, and if we do that, we should see the bars appear, and you should be able to modify them. Unless you click on that last screen, it's going to make them all disappear again. So the workaround is to click on the navigation controller or to delete that last connection until you want to actually test it and see what happens.
Is it imperative that in our case, the red view controller is a subclass of the view controller that it unwinds from?
So I made this a subclass because what it gets is the functionality that we added for the numbered view controller. So the way this sort of works is we're subclassing from UI view controller, which is Apple's code. When I created my own class called numbered view controller, we have it so that it creates a number in the center of the screen, and it has all of these functionalities. When I subclass the red view controller from numbered view controller, I get that center label. And then I'm adding another feature, which is the unwind to red, which gives me some additional properties.
Okay, so then we could.
So if I didn't, as an example, if I didn't subclass from this and I subclass from UI view controller, then the red view controller is not going to have a number when we run it.
But it would still unwind properly, though, correct?
As long as I didn't break that, yeah. So if we go, we don't see a number, I go to green, purple, orange. This done works. If I go to green, blue, yellow, this done should be the unwind to red, and that works.
Okay.
But if I want to get that same behavior, then I want to make sure that I subclass from numbered view controller so it adds that label.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense.
Hey, Paul. While you're launching that, I had a quick question. I was going over a tutorial yesterday for a personal project that I'm working on, and they introduced it was a popover. It was a modal, or it was either modal or popover, and they had a dismiss method. Does that only work on modally presented view controllers and popover view controllers?
Yeah, that's a method for getting rid of another view controller. And I mean, that's something we can always test, is we can connect something and you can just add a button and try writing a dismiss method. So we did the pop to root view controller. I don't remember what happened, so we could do something like dismiss. And this says, if I'm looking at the documentation, and this is where going back to documentation is really important. So I'm just typing dismiss. It's giving me an autocomplete suggestion. It tells me it dismisses the view controller that was presented modally. So that, in my mind, means that this should not work, but I don't really know until I test it. So I'll just do this, and we'll see if that first done gets rid of a view controller or if it doesn't. So let's click purple, orange, and if I click done here, nothing happens.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, so that is all I have for the lesson. Can I get a rating in the Zoom channel if you just give me a 1 to 3 on how comfortable you are with the tab bar and the navigation controller?
Oh, I'm looking at the numbered view controller, and in the view did load, we set the size and the position of the text label.
Uh-huh.
We do that again in the view will appear. Is there a reason to set it in both places, or since it's gonna set it in view will appear, do we still need to set it in view did load?
I'll show you what happens. So the iPhone's going to keep the same position since I don't have auto layout. You see how 4 is clipping?
Yeah.
So that's no good. So in order to fix that, I'll do something like size to fit, because 4 takes up more space than a 1. So if I rerun this, I go green, purple, orange, and that's looking okay. So if I want to go a little deeper, I'm going to have to go the blue route, yellow, repeat. And I actually disconnected that, didn't I? We'd notice this with double digits then. So if I reconnect repeat to red, do a show, we'll run it, see what happens. So I'll just try and cycle through a bunch of these till we get to double digits. So it's really hard to see, but I would say that's going to be off center. And if I were to make this like bigger numbers, we're going to notice that this is going to keep drawing sort of 1s, 3, 0, blah, blah, blah. So it's not going to be centering it. And this is only because I'm readjusting the position, and we're not using auto layout. We could use auto layout. So my solution was to resize the label and then recenter it.
Yeah, I guess my question was, can we remove it from the view did appear function or method and just have it in the view will appear method?
Yeah, that's a valid way. But if we didn't have this method, then it would look weird. So by having it in both places, we get the sort of benefit of actually seeing something when we first run it.
Okay.
So that's mainly why I put it here. If you were to refactor this code and it wasn't here, then you wouldn't have anything on the screen, or it wouldn't be correct. Typically, I would add auto layout constraints, but I didn't want to go into that. So the other alternative is if I actually had given this a size to make it bigger, I wouldn't have had to keep resizing it. But I don't know. Personally, in apps, I always resize to fit. So I didn't want to show the other example because it's never how I do it.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, so for your afternoon project, you are, let's see, where is it? It's not on these. You should be doing this contained project. And this is going to have some navigation. And basically what we're going to have you set up is a series of info screens that go over how a game might be. There's going to be some settings that you need to keep track of, and then there's going to be a game. This is going to be using SpriteKit, and there's multiple tabs, so you're going to be able to hold on to the information. So if you got through the sprint challenge, I think that you should be in a good place to work on this. The info screen, typically in an app, we like to have some onboarding screens that sort of show people how to use it. So that's kind of what these go through. We've got next that tell you how to play the game. There's only one thing that you need to do. And the settings change the way that the crab will move on the screen. Throughout this, there should be steps on how to get started. So we're going to start with a single view application. And there's some utility files in here as well. There's a model for keeping track of if you should be rolling or if you should be zooming. You're going to build the interface with the tab bar. You're also going to have a navigation for the setting screens. And this should go through that setting screen. Using what we did, setting up that done action when you're complete, so it goes back to the root view controller. We've got a setting screen, setting that up, and then we've got the game screen. So the game screen is going to use SpriteKit, and you're going to add a SpriteKit view. So if I go back here to the storyboard, I believe there's a SpriteKit view. Let's see what that one looks like. So if we're typing this, if you see these little circles, this is a SpriteKit view. So you can just drag this onto a screen and you can just resize to make it fit. So this is a game view. This is slightly different than a UI view. It's set up to display game animation stuff. And let's see what else. So this will connect. We're providing you pretty much, I think, all the code that you need, so don't worry too much about it. But this will connect your SpriteKit scene. So you'll set an outlet, and then you'll have it connected and presented. And then in here, we've got another code file. This is the custom scene. This will, say, what's it do? It will add a crab. Crab is an SK sprite node. So anytime we're drawing a game character, we're going to use a sprite node. And that's what this is. And we're going to add that to the scene. So like we add subviews in a view controller, in SpriteKit, we add child. And this just means we're adding something to the screen. And for the crab, we are going to load the textures. I think we have a special method that we also provide in the repository that will load up the animation frames for you, so you don't have to worry about that. And then we set a position. So we'll set that position. The other thing that we're providing is a touch method. So anytime you are working with SpriteKit, you have this touches began. So when we're working with the iPhone simulator and you're tapping on different regions, that's going to trigger this method to run. And so this will try and find a touch from your fingers. You can have multiple touches. And typically on the simulator, it's a single touch where I'm clicking. If I hold the Option key, I can actually get 2 touches and I can sort of rotate around the simulator. But don't worry about that because we don't need that for this. This will grab a touch position. It gets the location. It then will create a move action. SpriteKit uses these actions to do different things. And so based on, let's see, based on this model object, you'll want to zoom or roll. And it looks like it's using a shared model. We haven't actually talked about a shared model. So let's think about this. I would just pass in the settings to the scene. I'll take a look at this. I might have after lunch. I might update this. So take lunch now and then come back and I'll look through this if there's any changes I need to make for things that we haven't talked about. Because we haven't done shared models, I really don't like doing that. I'd rather pass in the data. Any questions on the afternoon project?
I see it at the bottom there. It's using a switch for a Boolean and then an if statement for a Boolean. Is that just to show the differences there?
Yeah, it looks like it.
And when you say shared, is that a singleton?
Yeah, that's what it looks like it is.
Okay.
I don't like those, so I don't recommend using them. We will talk more about that in I think once we get to dependency injection and some other things. But what I recommend is passing the data in rather than having a shared instance. This is basically like a global variable. And if you're new to programming, you're not going to understand what I'm talking about, so don't worry too much. I will run through this and I'll have an update after your lunch. Awesome. Great work, everyone.
Paul, if you know how to do a shared, can we just do it? Or you want us to use?
I would say no, I don't like them.
Okay.
That's my preference. I'll go through this, so I will have an update after lunch. Thank you.